Want to throw away everything we built for you for this?" My father didn't yell. That was the thing. He said it the way you'd say, "The milk is expired." Flat, final, already done with the conversation. I was 23. It was a Tuesday in October. The dining room smelled like the pot roast my mother had made, and I had just told my parents I was leaving the graduate nursing program to open a bakery. Not just a bakery, my bakery. The thing I had been building in secret for 2 years, recipes tested at midnight on weekends, a small business plan drafted in the Notes app on my phone, a savings account I hadn't touched since I was 19. I had been careful. I had been deliberate. I thought if I showed up with enough evidence of seriousness, they would at least pause before dismissing me. They did not pause. "A bakery," my mother said. She didn't say it like a question. She said it the way you'd repeat something a child had said, to let them hear how it sounded out loud. "Yes," I said, "I've been working on this for." "We didn't pay for your education so you could sell muffins," my father said. "I want to tell you I said something sharp and perfect. I want to tell you I had a speech ready. I didn't." I sat there for a moment with my hands in my lap and I thought about all the nights I had stood at my apartment counter at 11 p.m. Flour on my elbows, testing the ratio on a brown butter almond cake for the 14th time. Happy in a way I had never once been in a clinical rotation. "I'm not asking for permission," I said. "I'm telling you because you're my parents." My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. "Then there's nothing more to say," he said. That was it. No shouting, no door slamming, just the quiet, deliberate withdrawal of any interest in what I might do next. My mother got up and started clearing dishes. My father turned on the television in the next room. I sat at the table for another few minutes because I didn't know what else to do, and then I drove home. 3 days later, my mother called. I actually thought she was calling to say she had thought it over. Instead, she called to tell me that my cousin was finishing her residency and that there was still time for me to reapply to the nursing program and that she had spoken to someone she knew on the admissions committee. I said thank you and I'll think about it, and I hung up and I did not think about it. Here is what my parents knew about me. I was their oldest daughter. I had done everything in the right order: good grades, college, graduate program. I had never given them a reason to worry. I had also, and this is the part they had never quite processed, never once in my life told them what I actually wanted. I had answered the question they were asking, which was, "What are you going to do that makes sense?" And I had never answered the question underneath it, which was, "What do you want your life to feel like?" What I wanted it to feel like was Saturday morning. Specifically, my grandmother's Saturday mornings, the ones I had spent every weekend of my childhood in her kitchen in rural Virginia, watching her move between the oven and the counter like she knew exactly where everything was going. She made pies that people drove 40 minutes for. She made bread that I have spent 15 years trying to replicate. She never wrote a single recipe down. She said if you know what it's supposed to taste like, you don't need instructions. She died when I was 18. I went to college 6 weeks later. I do not think I ever actually processed either of those things in sequence. The bakery was, I understand this now, the first decision I had ever made that was entirely mine. No input, no committee, no asking whether it made sense. It made sense to me, which I had finally decided was enough. I signed the lease on a commercial kitchen space in March. It was not a glamorous space. It was 400 square feet in the back of a building that had previously been a dry cleaner, and it smelled faintly of chemicals for the first 3 weeks until I repainted everything and put in a secondhand ventilation fan. I had enough savings to cover 6 months of operating costs if I was careful. I planned to be very careful. The farmer's market was the entry point. I got a vendor slot on Saturday mornings. Outside, 2 folding tables, a canopy, a cash box, and everything I had baked starting at 3 a.m. The first Saturday I sold out in 2 hours. The second Saturday I ran out in 90 minutes. By the fifth Saturday, people were arriving 40 minutes before the market opened and standing in a loose cluster near my tables, which felt both flattering and slightly alarming. I want to be honest about what that period was like, because I think people here, I started a business and it went well, and they imagined something cleaner than it was. I was working a part-time hospital admin job 3 days a week to cover rent. I was waking up at 2:30 most mornings. I had a recurring eye twitch for about 4 months that I'm fairly certain was stress. I eat a lot of granola bars standing over my sink because I kept forgetting actual meals. I had one friend who believed in what I was doing. My college roommate, who lived 2 hours away and texted me almost every night asking how it had gone, which sounds small and wasn't. My parents did not ask how it was going. My mother asked occasionally if I was eating enough. My father, when we were in the same room at holidays, would ask about my little project in a tone that suggested he had already decided the answer. I stopped telling them things, not dramatically, no announcement, no confrontation. I just started answering their questions with less. And after a while, they stopped asking questions that required real answers. And we all settled into a version of the relationship where everything was fine as long as we didn't discuss anything that mattered. The wholesale account changed everything. I had been selling at two farmers markets and doing custom orders when a woman came to my table one Saturday and introduced herself as the buyer for a small regional grocery chain, 4 locations, all within a 60-mile radius of where I was operating. She had been watching my table for 3 weeks, she said. She wanted to know if I could scale. I said yes. I had absolutely no idea if I could scale. I went home and spent the next 6 hours figuring out if I could scale. It turned out I could, but not in 400 square feet. I found a larger kitchen space, 1,200 square feet, proper commercial equipment, room for a small retail counter in front. The numbers required a loan. The loan required a business plan, financials, 2 years of market data, and approximately 400 hours of my life I did not have. I did it anyway. I filed the paperwork in August. I got the approval in September. I did not tell my parents. I had started to understand that I was not keeping things from them out of spite. I was keeping things from them because sharing good news had started to feel like offering something I cared about to people who would hold it carelessly. The new space opened in November. I named it for my grandmother. Not her name exactly. Something that carried her, that held the feeling of her kitchen on a Saturday morning. I put a photograph of her on the wall behind the counter. Black and white, flour on her hands, not looking at the camera. By February, we had to wait for custom orders. By April, a food writer included us in a piece about regional bakeries doing interesting things. By June, we were on a list. Not a national list, a regional one, but a real one, published somewhere people actually read. I hired my first employee in March, my second in May. By midsummer, I had 4 people working with me, and I had started sleeping a full night again, which felt like a miracle. I was 26. It had been 3 years since the dinner table conversation. My brother called me in late July. He was 3 years younger than me and had always been the quieter witness to our family's dynamics. Not unkind, not an ally exactly, just present. He said Mom had been asking about me. I said I talked to Mom. He said, "You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. "There's something else," he said. "Dad's firm is restructuring." I let that sit for a moment. "How bad?" I said. "Pretty bad. He's not going to say anything to you. You know how he is." I did know how he was. I want to tell you I felt satisfied. Some clean, justified sense of, well, there it is. I didn't feel that. I felt tired and a little sad, and also deeply, unpleasantly aware that I was now the one with financial stability in this situation, which was not a role I had ever expected to occupy at 26. My mother called 2 weeks later. She said they were reassessing things. She said my father was looking at other opportunities. She said, and here she paused, and I could hear what the pause cost her, that they had been thinking about me, about my business, about how things had gone. "We didn't understand what you were building," she said. That sentence. I have thought about it a lot since then. Not we were wrong, though I think she knew that. Not we're sorry, though I think she meant something close to it. Just, we didn't understand, which was true, and which also placed the failure in the not understanding, not in the not trying to understand. "I know," I said. "Your father would like to come see it," she said. "The bakery. If that's all right." I said I'd think about it. I meant that. I wasn't performing distance. I actually needed to think about it. Because what I had built was mine, in a way that very few things in my life had been mine, and I had built it without them. And the question of whether to let them into it was not simple. They came on a Saturday morning in October. 3 years almost to the day, from the Tuesday night in the dining room. I had not staged anything. I had not prepared a speech or decided in advance how it was going to go. It was a regular Saturday, busy, 4 people behind the counter, the line out the door by 8:30. My mother walked in first, and stood in the doorway for a moment, in a way that I recognized, that I had seen her do in other rooms when something caught her off guard. My father came in behind her. He looked at the photograph on the wall. He stood there for a long time. She'd have liked this, he said. He meant my grandmother. I know, I said. We didn't do the conversation that day. There was too much happening, and also, I think we were all too aware that the conversation had a weight to it that a busy Saturday morning couldn't hold. My mother ordered a coffee and one of the almond cakes. My father stood slightly to one side and watched what was happening in the room with an expression I couldn't fully read. Before they left, my mother took my hand briefly, the way she used to when I was small, and didn't say anything. My father said the almond cake was very good. Coming from him, in that moment, that was most of what I needed. I want to be careful about what I say next, because I have heard too many stories where this part goes one of two ways. Either everything is forgiven and we all cry and nothing ever gets addressed, or the narrator holds firm and refuses any connection and we're meant to applaud the self-protection. I don't think it's that clean in either direction. Here is what is true. My parents did not support me when it mattered. They made me feel small for wanting something they couldn't understand. Those years of silence, of little project, of pivot back now phone calls. I don't get those back. I don't carry them with bitterness, but I don't pretend they didn't happen. Here is also what is true. They are my parents. They came from a generation and a set of experiences that made fear look like wisdom, that made control look like love. I do not think they meant to diminish me. I think they were frightened, and I think frightened people do not always know what they're doing to the people in front of them. I am not going to tell you I've forgiven them completely. I'm not going to tell you we talk every Sunday and everything is warm and resolved. What I can tell you is that when my mother comes in on Saturday mornings now, she sits at the corner table with her coffee and she watches people come in and she looks, I don't know, proud is the word that comes to mind, but it's a complicated kind of proud, the kind that carries something underneath it that I think she's still working out. My father helped me negotiate a lease renewal last spring. He didn't offer. I asked. It was the first time I'd asked him for something in 4 years, and I want to be honest. It mattered to me that I was asking from a position of not needing, that I had the option to handle it myself and was choosing to include him. He stayed up until midnight going over the terms with me. He found 3 things I had missed. Afterward, he said, "You built something real." Not, "I'm sorry I didn't see it coming." Not, "I should have believed in you." Just, "You built something real." I said, "I know." The bakery turns 4 years old next month. We have 2 locations now. The original and a second one we opened last winter, 18 minutes away. I have 11 people working with me. We do wholesale to 7 accounts. I am still the one who opens on Saturdays, still the one who unlocks the door at 5:30 when the ovens need time to come up to temperature. On the wall behind the counter at the second location, I put a second photograph of my grandmother. Same era, different day. In this one, she is looking at the camera. She is not smiling exactly, but there is something in her face that I have looked at 1,000 times and that I think is satisfaction. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing exactly what you made and exactly how you made it. I have her recipes now. I worked them out myself, the way she would have wanted, by taste, by feel, by making them wrong until I made them right. I stand in my kitchen on Saturday mornings, and the light comes through at a low angle the way it did in her house, and sometimes the smell is so close that I forget for a second where I am, and then I remember and I think I built this out of nothing except what I already knew. Nobody gave me that, and nobody can take it back. There's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. The way my father said, "You'll never make it," without raising his voice. He wasn't cruel about it. He was certain. And certainty, I've learned, is a different kind of damage than anger. Anger passes. Certainty gets into the walls. What I didn't know then, standing in that dining room at 23 with my hands in my lap, was that his certainty was going to become the thing I built against. Not in a bitter way. I'm past performing bitterness. It costs too much. But every morning I unlocked that first kitchen at 5:30. Every time I got the brown butter ratio wrong and had to start over, every single granola bar I ate standing over the sink, because I'd forgotten to eat a real meal. All of it was quietly, stubbornly answering a question he thought was already settled. I think that's what people miss when they talk about success stories. They want there to be a moment of transformation, some scene where the protagonist suddenly becomes capable. That's not how it works. What actually happens is that you just keep choosing the thing over and over on the days when it's clearly working and on the days when it clearly isn't. And at some point, the accumulation of all those small choices becomes something other people can see from the outside. My grandmother never talked about discipline. She talked about knowing what something was supposed to taste like. I think that's the same thing, said differently. You have to know what you're trying to get to, clearly enough that you can tell when you're not there yet, clearly enough that you don't stop just because someone tells you the destination doesn't exist. That's what I want to say to anyone watching this who has a version of my father in their life, not necessarily a person, maybe just a voice, maybe just the part of yourself that absorbed what someone else believed about you before you knew any better. The decision to keep going isn't heroic. It's not a single dramatic moment. It's just the next morning and the one after that, and choosing to act like you know something they don't, even when you're not entirely sure yet. What I've come to believe, and I mean this not as a philosophy, but as something I actually observed happen in my own life, is that your choices compound. The ones that cost you something, the ones made without anyone watching, the ones made when you could have very reasonably stopped, they add up into a person. And the person you become by making them is not the person anyone else gets to decide you are. My father said the almond cake was very good. He said it the way someone says something when they are also saying something else. I heard both things. I let them both be true. I built this from a recipe I reconstructed entirely from memory and instinct, and getting it wrong enough times that I finally got it right. Nobody handed it to me. Nobody was going to. That part I had to figure out on my own, and it turned out that was the whole point.